Welcome to the Connection Matters podcast. I'm your host, Leona Johnson. In this podcast, we explore the intricate weave of consciousness, empowerment, connection to the sacred, and cultural emergence. I believe that now, more than ever, we're being called to craft a new story, one of community, deep listening, creative potential, cultural repair, and an embodied understanding of the interconnected web of all things. Let's do the work together so that we can move forwards with authenticity and integrity, knowing that we're contributing to a healthy, regenerative culture for future generations. My mission with this podcast is to inspire and empower you to step into this vision for life. Each episode, I'll bring you thought-provoking conversations with leading voices in the field, but you'll also find solo episodes where I dive deep into my passion, connected self-leadership and everyday spirituality, giving you actionable tools to integrate into your daily life. Subscribe now on your favourite podcast platform if you haven't already, and if you enjoy the show, please share it with those who would appreciate it. It really helps when you do. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help others find us who might need that dose of hope and inspiration. Finally, to get notified straight into your inbox, feel free to sign up to the mailing list in the show notes below. This is also where I share weekly inspirational thoughts and any downloadable freebies that I talk about during the episode. My aim is to serve. I am so grateful that you are here. Hello and welcome to Connection Matters podcast today. I'm Leona, and in this episode we are diving into a conversation that I think will speak to anyone who's ever felt the pull to seek something deeper. Something more real and alive than what we were told life should be. My guest today is Annette Knopp, a meditation teacher, counsellor, and author of Mystic Nomad, a woman's wild journey to true connection, which I love the title of this book. Her story spans continents and decades, from early years of spiritual devotion and adventure to the painful reckonings that come when ideals and power become entangled. What I know about Annette's work is the honesty with which she names the illusions of the spiritual path, the ways that we can lose ourselves even while trying to awaken, and how she's come to understand healing and connection as something profoundly human and tender and embodied. Before we dive in, I also want to mention that I've got a free live masterclass coming up called Designing a Life Aligned with Your True North, and this is a chance for us to be together in person, a chance to pause, a chance to reflect and explore what alignment and purpose look like in your own life now. And you can find the link to sign up in the show notes below. So let's get settled in. Maybe we can take a breath and just feel your feet on the ground. And you can find, this place of connection, even though we are far apart. So, Annette, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Right now, with that introduction, I feel already in a yummy space.
Well, it is lovely to have you here with us in this space. And I guess I'm going to dive straight in, because you described a powerful restlessness that led you to leave everything that you knew behind. And I'm really curious about what the deeper longing underneath that impulse in your life at that time in your life was that set you out on this journey. And maybe we can start there. How does that sound?
Yeah. Sounds great. Thank you. So the restlessness, I think, or what I feel is sort of that restlessness that I feel from very early on was that sense of something didn't match up. my inner experience with what the surroundings were saying how life should be or how life works, there was sort of a jarring sense. And the restlessness was also actually quite a profound suffering already as a very young age. I came from a very complicated home, and also the neighborhood was not particularly safe. I started to become sexually abused by older men in the neighborhood at age 8. And the only sense of solace that I could find, or something that matched my inner experience, was when I was out in the woods. And luckily, I grew up not exactly completely rural area, but at the edge of a little suburban place, and behind my backyard was like a huge forest where I could get lost in. And it helped that a childhood friend lived on the farm, so I was out there with the sheep and the goose and the ponies and cleaning stables. So that was something that sort of matched, and it made me feel home. But the rest of my experience was primordial, a really deep lack of belonging. And I think what drove me then was that lack of belonging and trying to find a belonging in the world or with others, or something that would make sense. So I think that was really driving that profound sense of I don't belong.
Mm.
And today I know, with all the studies I've done and trainings, that it's actually, for anybody who's listening, it's for many of us the earliest developmental trauma that is possible is this lack of belonging, this sort of that there's this implicit sense like you don't understand why you dropped on this planet, or that you grow up in the wrong family.
Mm.
And I think that's what many seekers actually often have. And we can say, wow, that's a profound pain, and it takes very long time to actually unwind that and repair that. But on the positive side is, of course, is always suffering or crisis. They push us to look for something that is beyond our everyday life. And so I think, yeah, that was the start.
Mm.
And also tremendous curiosity of how does this all work, and what is life about, and who am I really? So yeah, these fundamental questions that some
Mm.
of us just have from early on. Yeah.
Yes, it's so true, isn't it? That there is, unless we were lucky enough to have, you know, the a secure foundation to
Mm,
grow up from, which, given the culture of disconnect and
mm,
inherited trauma that so many of us, I think I would
mm.
say all of us, are living within, it's really hard to ever have
Yeah.
that. And this need for belonging is so powerful.
Mm,
And somehow some of us manage to find a life that might look
mm,
good on the outside, but
mm,
unless we've actually
mm,
really addressed the root causes of the
mm,
problems that we experienced on the way to that, it
mm.
often looks nicer on the outside than it feels on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the difference between fitting in and belonging,
Mm.
right? And I think so often, I think we all know that, those moments in life, or periods in life where we maybe try to fit in,
Mhm.
because that pain of I don't belong is so profound. And I think some of us never actually find the difference between what is true belonging and the fitting in. Oh, I'm ticking up all the boxes. I have this and I have that and I have that title and I live in this neighborhood, so I belong. But and then sort of we plaster it over, right, with so many things, substances and extra activities and busyness, so we don't have to feel that pain of separation
Mhm.
deep within us.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. So you found yourself in a life in Spain, if I'm right, and married, and in a world where it looked like you had that life, but something drove you
Mm,
at one point
mm,
to leave all of that behind and then go
mm.
on this quest of life. What was it that
Yeah.
brought you to that?
Well, I think before that, I was born in Germany. So I left when I was 21. I left behind that painful childhood home and the unsafe neighborhood. And there was also, I think also what also made me feel I didn't belong was the German culture, which today I have appreciation for. But the cerebralness, the duty, the productivity, and I had been enough in summer vacations to more southern European parts where I felt like, oh, this is how I want to live when I grow up. Which is, we can say it's more heart-based, right? More celebratory. And so I left when I was 21 and I moved to Lanzarote, so anyone who's in Europe, like one of the Canary Islands. And I stayed basically 9 years in Spain. Eventually, I I started to study. I realized I need actually some sort of career or professional foundation, and I became a interpreter for law and economy. And I thought, oh, that's the right choice because it gives me freedom. And then I had this pretty lovely relationship, you could say, from the outside with a Spanish man. And he kept proposing and proposing. And when will we have children? And inside it was just like, oh my God, no, this is like, I'm still hurting. There was still suffering and I actually had severe depression. And I was trying to cover it over with doing all the right things. And so then it finally broke. And this is when at 29, which is for the astrologers here, the Saturn return, those year or 2 year periods in your life where we feel really where are the shoes too small or this doesn't feel right, and we tend to often undergo drastic changes. Some people leave everything, they realize, oh my God, I'm a lawyer but I'm actually an artist at heart. Some people have their first children, some people have their first divorce. So, and for me it was leaving my idyllic, perfect life behind and strapping on a backpack and reducing all my belongings. And off I went to India. And yeah, and the sense was, yeah, this is all good from the outside, but it's inside again. It doesn't, I'm not happy. I feel I don't belong. Yeah.
There is so much I resonate with in your story so far because I had the question growing up, there's got to be more to life. There's got to be more to life. This was like a kind of something that was within me and this feeling that I didn't fit in, but I was doing all of the right things. And then I got to age 29 and I also went away to India. My dad was just, I remember my dad said to me, why would you go away alone at this age? Most people have got this out of their systems by now. And and I went away and then I came back and then I made the big decision. I'd been in Manchester for most of my adult life until that point, and I made the decision I was going to leave because I needed something to change. What actually happened was that I then found the partner, the father of my children, and I ended up staying for the next. But I knew that I either needed a really good reason to stay that was going to create a shift in my role as a human being, or I needed to get to leave. And so it's really interesting that that we share those kind of time frames and that longing
Yeah.
for belonging.
Yeah.
But it was the point at which I really truly started seeking beyond what I already knew because my children were the motivation for that. But I know that you traveled to many different places and
Mm.
explored different traditions, different teachers. What did you learn about the difference in those journeys between genuine spiritual guidance and the traps that can appear along the way whenever we take ourselves into that world of seeking and exploring?
Right. I think for many of us, I just lump us all together as modern Westerners, let's say like this. Most of us have grown up in nuclear families, have been educated in mostly left brain dominated education systems. We all live more or less in a paradigm, in a culture that is sort of very Newtonian. It's sort of, the mechanistical universe. Um, and I'm saying this because that often is already the root cause of why we don't feel a belonging. We get so trained into this thought-based knowing and understanding life through conceptual terms, whether experiential knowing and and together with that there is not much value giving to our innate worth. It's more like, no, you have to become somebody. You have to do A, B, C in order to be complete, or you have to have X, Y, Z, and that means happiness, right? So all of that is creates, I think, in modern Westerners a particular emotional wounding and makeup that many other cultures don't share with us. And I'm not sort of making other cultures better, but like more earth-based traditions, right? Or if we look at the East, there's more often not so much an individualistic outlook on life. It's much more community-based. So there is a different type of fundamental belonging to the whole that they have more than what the modern industrialized Western culture has sort of bred in us. So, and when we have that, um, we have we relate to what often in the Eastern wisdom tradition is sort of like a more traditional guru role, right? Like there's the teacher who has all the answers. There's this authority who has reached some type of state. And here we come with our particular wounding of not belonging. And together with, what that creates also in the relationship as we grow up as kids of looking still for the perfect mother or the perfect father figure. So we relate to the guru very different than maybe a Tibetan or an Indian would do. And I think there's sort of an unhealthy setup from the start where we in our need for healing, in our need for easing the pain inside, we often, as Westerners, relate then to that authority figure as the one who can fix it all. And I think that's something that is a big trap for Westerners. So if I would say what is a good criteria to look out for is that whoever that teacher is, however you want to call it, the guide, the teacher, whether it's the shaman, whether it's the Tibetan Rinpoche, whether it's the mindfulness teacher, is that is the setup, is the group reflecting sort of in a certain way more contemporary, you could even say more democratic, non-hierarchical sort of container. And we are all human beings. And of course, there's still somebody, wow, this person has traveled further along the map, right? Has more mileage under the hood. And we all know what that means. It's the same like if you have a particular skill and you have been using that for 10 years, of course you have more expertise. Of course you have probably something to share to someone who's an apprentice. But it doesn't make this other person more worthy than yourself. And I think that deep sense of worthlessness that many of us have in the West, which we try to fill with all the externals, that is, creating often a very unhealthy setup. So this is one of the traps, I would say. And the second one is when when the body is not included. So if we just take the practice of meditation, and let's take even mindfulness, that has become so pretty much mainstream and is an incredible, powerful teaching, of course. But it often is also just used as, it has been instrumentalized. Do mindfulness so you sleep better. Do mindfulness so you can be more productive. Do mindfulness so A, B, C, D, right? But they ripped it out of a mandala of teachings, which is all about the sacred, about, what is the source of the sacred within, how to connect with the sacred without. And mindfulness is one particular element in that. So, and often, again, with us in the West, we already have this incredible big split between mind and body, which is pretty made up, doesn't exist, because even neuroscience, right, shows us like this is like an integrative whole. And so when we then go to teachings who, again, just use something as a goal to get somewhere, or our teachings where we meditate and think it's just something I do with my mind, then again, another split is happening. I don't even belong in this body. So I think that's another trap. So it should be embodied, should, but in the best way, there's really practices, or there's um, some way of really bringing us back to the body, and also this humanizing of our experiences, and that we all have innate worth. So yeah.
Oof, yeah, there's so much in that. It's interesting, isn't it, how sometimes there's so much available to us these days that we can access. Thanks to the ability that we have to travel to different parts of the world, or even through our screens, or through the people who have done the traveling, who bring to us the wisdom and the depth of knowledge. We can experience ways of being that have traveled through time, through many different cultures, but somehow the idea of, to use meditation as an example, meditation becomes the end rather than something that we might include as part of our way of life that enables us to have that deeper connection to who we are within the landscape of life as it is around us, and to all of that. So yeah, I really, really relate to that. How one of my teachers would say that, what happens when you get to that point within meditation and within mindfulness is that's the point where you then start to interact with consciousness, with the interconnected web of life, not the point at which you feel like you're there and you're enlightened, or you've achieved
Right.
full presence, and that's the goal. It's really there. From there, how can I then listen to what wants to come through me? What is my gift? What am I here to do? And that happens
Beautiful.
over and again.
Yeah. That correlates very much with my teachers and how I feel it today. And there's a really beautiful um, explanation, I think, what we are talking about in the Tibetan language. The one term for meditation is gom, and what it means is familiarizing. So meditation is actually about, so the formal practice is all about familiarizing us with the innate state of meditation that is already there. And so the ground of being. And of course we forget it. It's so subtle, we overlook it. It's so simple, it can't be that, says the ego. And obviously, as we know, it takes practice to chip away at all the ways of how we have twisted ourselves away from this open ground that's always here. And yeah, so maybe I just stopped there.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's
Mm,
beautiful. But I'm interested in your journey because what I believe your journey reflects is the journey of life that we're all on. Because what I understand from your experiences is that whilst you've explored some and had some really amazing openings and
mm,
opportunities to go deeper in different traditions, you've also had some real challenges along that path that have
mm,
had you really question your own faith and belief in the
mm.
nature of connection. Would you say
Yeah,
more about that?
yeah. So the first thing that always comes up is, I think maybe, when we hear about someone else's path, there's often like, oh, I should have done it like this, or I should have done it like him. And so the comparison, I just wanted sort of to point it out. And I think my path and my unfolding, and of course it's still unfolding, there's no end for me, um, is has been very adventurous, and that's a little bit like my nature. I've been always more sort of, okay, I'm afraid, but I go anyway. And also routine was something I hated with my guts. So I just wanted to throw it out because we can have a profound path being married, having children, right? So it's not all, wow, I need to go to India. Wow, I need to do all these things. So, and actually in the Upanishads, it said the highest yoga is to be married and raise children. So they want to really get away with it. There's not this idealization of somebody who's just a 100% full-time contemplative or cave yogi. So I think this familiarizing with the ground and finding belonging within and with the larger web of life is something that we can actualize in all circumstances. Um, but the challenges that I faced had a lot to do with the unresolved trauma in my own psyche and my own body. And coming back a little bit to what you say, what are the things that we need to look out for when we um, meet a teacher or commit to a particular spiritual practice? I think it's really important that there is some basic understanding, not that the teacher needs to be a full-time trauma therapist or something, but that there is an understanding that trauma or psychological development is as important as the developing spiritual maturity, or as developing or as having a really good connection with that ground of being. Because if we don't have that, if we don't work on both strands, there is eventually a spiritual bypassing, right? Where we use our even genuine spiritual insights, or we use our spiritual practices as a way to cover over, suppress, ignore, the pain that's inside. And so we're looking, for one hand, I often say, spirituality is allowing us to find that which is already free and is untouched by all the calamities of the world, is undisturbed by the trauma. But at the same time, how spirit expresses itself through us is, of course, depends on like how clear is the system. And I'm not setting up a perfect standard here or something, but my own experiences of having severe attachment trauma um, mm, led to that I still very much needed validation from the outside. And so no matter how deep my spiritual openings was, no matter how profound and real it all was, in my everyday life, I still related to people from a very fragmented sense of self. And that led me to trust, one teacher who is not trustworthy. And I got sexually assaulted on a silent retreat. And I think it only was possible because I didn't trust enough my own knowing. I still sort of, you know, put my authority outside of myself, even with all the experiences I had that would have not been necessary at all. But there's the habit. There's these implicit habits that we tend to have. And this is where I think whether we call it deep trauma work or psychological work, or whether we look at, through different lenses, we need to do this cleaning up a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true because it doesn't matter how far we move through life, if we enter into a new relationship with another, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see and witness the same patterns arising if
Yeah.
they've not been processed or acknowledged or worked with in a good way.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
does one do that? People understand. I think there's many people who are listening to this podcast will know that the inner work is where it's at. This is what we need to do. But how do we do that when we are really often grieving and suffering from
Mm.
things that have happened in the past? Sometimes we know about and sometimes we don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, I think first, just even to have the understanding that we need both, that sort of, yeah, and we could even say, even the Buddha, I don't quote the Buddha much, but anyway, he said the whole spiritual path is about relief of suffering. There's no talk about enlightenment and this and that. This is something that, got propped into it later, even though there's a fruition to the path, but it's all about relieving suffering. And I think there are there least need to be these two elements of, the practices or the path or the tradition or the understanding. Something in us is already whole. Something in us is free of pain and undisturbed. And to uncover that, this is why we do spiritual practices, whether it's a Sufi practice, whether it's a shamanic practice, whether it's, I think we all have spiritual temperaments and we feel an affinity with one path more than the other. So this is really important. It's not like, this is the only path. But then the second thing is, as I said, as modern Westerners, we have more emotional wounding than more earth-based cultures, more community or child-focused cultures. So there's also having a spirit, a therapist, knowing, or parts work, having sort of a practice and understanding that helps us to work with our inner landscape and to work with those, this protecting parts and the small self. And how can I sort of build up a connection with those parts within myself that maybe didn't get back then what was needed? So, and that's not necessarily, what you will find in a meditation path. So I think we need to have these two elements. And I think doing just one is doing us a little bit of a disfavor because we can go to therapy till the cows walk on the moon. And if there's not that inclusion of that transcendent dimension, then we keep sort of washing the dirty laundry over and over again, but we never really get into that felt sense of, oh my God, here it is. Here is that peace, or here's that freedom, or whatever qualifier you wanna give it. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
I absolutely agree with this because I think so many of us, we might have glimpses of or of a vision of what we would love to experience, but we get
Mm.
held back by limiting beliefs or
Mm.
wounds or things that we carry with us. But if we
Yeah.
don't have the vision, and so we do need to do that work to really understand those parts of us that need a little bit more tenderness and tending. But if we don't have the vision, then we have nothing to pull us forwards, nothing to aspire
Mm.
to, nothing that enables us to see the vision beyond
Mm.
the vision of what we are in, and
Right.
to have that connection to a higher self, or
Yeah.
or a true
Yeah.
self, or however we want to see that. I call it my
Mm-hmm.
shining self, the one
Oh,
who who sees clearly, and who
lovely.
who actually is able to
Mm.
make good decisions based on the realization of the interconnectedness of all things. Um,
Beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And then what I understand from some of your work and some of what I've read is that part of the way that you have grown through some of the challenges that you've faced is through a deep realization and a strong commitment to being with
Mm.
pain, being
Right.
with those challenges rather than trying to sideline them so that
Mm.
you just step in. It's kind of what we've been saying. Um,
Mhm.
but
Mm.
in these times when we're also experiencing the despair and the collapse of the society that we've always known, um,
Mm.
what is it that helps us
Mm.
to stay with that, with the
Yeah.
darkness, rather than bypass it or try to
Yeah.
fix it?
Yeah. Well, I think we need a split approach in a certain way because, yes, it is absolutely true to nurture our capacity. We need to nurture our capacity to stay present, be present, hold hands with the natural element of life, the sadness, the grief, the pain, the adversity, right? So that's one part. But also sometimes, and then I'm going more to your question more as a collective, um, it is some pain identities in us have been so well rehearsed for so long that sometimes it's really important also to create a linkage. Sort of like, let's say there's a particular situation where every time you go, I'm making this up, every time you go to the library, the smell, the library person who sits there with the glasses who looks very grim at you, it activates like an old childhood wound in you. And so instead of just always feeling the pain of that younger part in you and holding her hand, yeah, that's great. But sometimes it's also important to make a linkage, which means you touch base on it, you feel it, and then you link it to an experience where you feel more like your shiny self or
Mhm.
more like your adult self. So I'm bringing this in because in many of the online meetings I do and also group teachings, we look a lot at how can we be a witness to what is going on, but without going numb. And this requires from all of us a really careful titration of how much can I expose myself to certain stimulants in everyday life. So the extreme is when people say, "Ooh, I can't deal with all of that. I need to take care of my peace. I don't want to know what's going on in the world."
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting. There's some research that these people, but that approach is often coming. There's already so much anxiety and unprocessed emotional turmoil within us. It doesn't necessarily lower their anxiety or lower their dread about what's going on in the world. And the other extreme is like where, and I've been in that extreme of like, reading voraciously, oh, this is going on, that is going on, and being very empathic and sort of really falling off the edge and just being drowning in despair and hopelessness. So there is this middle way of where, for instance, at the moment, I look over the headlines of certain news outlets. Maybe I read a longer piece, but I carefully dose how much do I take in so that I still can stay present with what's going on without dissociating, without going numb, and without drowning in hopelessness. And coming back to what you said about the shiny self, that reminds me of the Dharma talk of one of my favorite Buddhist teachers, who said, no matter how dark it gets in the world, you need to stay with your inner spark. This is the most important practice. So that shielding of that flame and feeding and tending to that place within us, whether we call it warmth, compassion, openness, again, is really fundamental. And then this careful, titrating and noticing what effect does it have on me when I look 2 hours on Instagram. And yeah, I'm tuned to all the right channels where they tell me what's going on here, where it's going on, what there, so I'm informed about all the suffering, but then I'm rendered into apathy, and I'm actually not having any skillfulness, and how can I be part of the solution? So I think this sort of
Yeah.
checking,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, what do we consume and how do we consume, and yeah. Mm.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, that we have some consciousness around this and make a choice. Because
Yeah.
we can either do that thing, like you say, of saying, I can't deal with any of this, I've got too much going on, which,
Mhm.
one could say has been orchestrated by the powers that be, that we are so busy
Mm.
that we can't actually
Yeah,
activate in order
yeah,
to make a
yeah,
change, the change that
yeah.
needs to happen. But at the same time, if we close down so much, it's not
Mm.
it's not like we don't know it's happening.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's kind of dragging us into the shadows rather than when we can
Mm.
actually turn towards it just a little and
Yeah.
hold some of it and give a boundaried amount of time to be able
Mm.
to say, and whether that's a little bit a few times a week, or whether we actually really allow ourselves to be with the grief or the challenge or the fear, or to do some research, but we do that with choice and consciousness, knowing that if we fall into it, we will be dragged under, and that's when we get to the point where we say, I can't do this anymore. And
Yeah.
yeah, it for me, actually, I did do a little bit of I can't deal with this whenever, for example, what's going on in Palestine now started. It didn't start actually 2 years ago, but when the rising up of the elevating of the challenging situation there came about, I didn't look at it for over a year because I had other things going on. And then I found myself feeling more and more and more challenged, but without really having the words or the research or the understanding fully of what was going on this time round. And once I gave myself the space to look at it, it actually empowered me to make
Mm.
choices that helped me to feel clear about my standpoint in this and
Yeah.
who I want to be as
Yeah.
humanity makes a
Mm.
choice about whether
Mm.
or not they want to stand with the sacredness of all life or not.
Yeah.
And it's
Mm.
it's a much more empowered place to be, even
Mm.
though I've spent more time crying about it in the last 6 months, for example, than I had the previous time. But
Mm.
actually releasing and having ways to, in my small way, do something actually helped me to feel more empowered. And
Mm.
um, and it's hard, isn't it? There's so many things, causes and reasons to be fearful right now, but actually, um, in many ways, all the things that we're talking about are more important than ever.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. It's funny when you spoke I relate very much to what you said. This, what you said, empowered, feeling empowered is really important. I work with the Human Rights Foundation, which is a big nonprofit that supports human rights activists, LGBTQ in the Middle East, or uh, Tibetans in diaspora, climate change activists. So it's all human rights, climate change activism. And people are really in the trenches on the front lines. Some of them have been imprisoned and tortured and live now in exile. Some of them live undercover, very, very dangerous lives. And one piece there is this, that first of all, what's really remarkable about, and this is why I'm feeling very drawn to support them and to volunteer, is that they don't give up hope. And it's quite stunning to me. And of course, they have lapses, and some burnout. So this is where I'm coming in and helping them to practice tools so that the burnout doesn't happen. But this, they don't have they don't even have a relative sense of safety most of the time. Even when they're living in exile, they often have Chinese agents following them, or I was in touch recently with a Nicaraguan dissident, and some spies or agents came over. Nicaragua is a dictator, for anybody who doesn't know. They came over the green border into Costa Rica, and they shot two movement members in the daylight. So this person who survived, she doesn't feel safe, but she does feel empowered to do something. She's not giving up her cause. So, however we can stay or nurture that sense of engagement or that sense of staying resourced in the midst of what's going on, that is sort of key. And it's totally fine to say right now, to compartmentalize. Right now, the most important thing is to nurture that connection within, to be kind to my neighbors, to not be completely dysregulated as I'm around my kids, and to do, local work, right? To feed the community from a resourced place. We can't save the entire world. So I think it's totally fine to say, wow, I know what's going on in Gaza, and I need to time out because I am needed right now here, and here's where I do think. And that's also sort of like a bit of a humility I think we all need to develop. It's like we can't save the entire world, but we can choose where we actually can be active and can be contributing to the repair of the world, and still feel interconnected with all that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you spoke of about the young woman who feels afraid but empowered is purpose and
Yeah.
meaning. Yeah, that
Yes.
when we find that connection to something that is greater than ourselves, greater than just keeping ourselves safe,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
we are driven to do. We do need to do. We do need to pay attention to how safe we are. But I think we've got so attached to our comfort that
Yeah.
we've kind of sleepwalked into a very dangerous culture
Mhm.
in the West, and what we see next will determine the future of humanity, as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
But but actually, we can find purpose through these global challenges, or we can find purpose through, like you say, working and being with our communities, with our families. And it is enough, as you say, to raise children and be um, in connection to how we're doing that, and doing that with consciousness, but having some sort of connection to that greater sense of I'm here to do something, and my life
Mhm.
is just a piece of this bigger picture, I think is so powerful and important.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my dog is sort of like banging against the window. Then come here. If you hear the background noise. Um, I think the purpose piece is really, really important, and I was always somebody who was a little allergic to it, but I've completely revised my understanding of it because I think for a long time I didn't feel a purpose, I didn't feel belonging, I didn't feel a purpose, and but today how I see it, and I was very impacted by a short TED talk I watched, one of those long flights, and and you can't sleep. So I watched the TED talk, and it was by this young Canadian woman. Her name is Emily Asfahani Smith. And she spoke about the 4 pillars of meaning in our lives. And it was just so fabulous. Because in the West, we always look for happiness, right? And how can I be happy? And this is what you need to be happy. But she said, forget happiness. Happiness is, temporary, fleeting moments. What really is important to see what are the 4 pillars that help us to live a meaningful life. And I think that's really great because first of all, we have more tolerance for problems, for challenges, right? That usually don't fit. No, this is too challenging. This doesn't make me happy. But the 4 pillars were, the first one was belonging. The second one was purpose. So, why do we feel, what are our values? What are our gifts? How can we contribute? And the third one was transcendence. So that shiny self or the open ground of being, however we want to label that. And the fourth was our narrative, the narrative of self. So what am I telling myself about when things don't work out? What stories does my mind get entangled with when I feel pain? So these 4 elements are really they made very profound sense to me, and I think it's a great framework to look at one's life. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And I'm just thinking about your book because the subtitle of your book is A Woman's Wild Journey to True Connection.
Mm.
So what does true connection mean to you now? If that was a narrative, if that was, part of the story that we tell ourselves, because I think part of the problem we don't know what narrative to tell ourselves, but what does true connection mean to you in real kind of lived terms?
Mhm. I think actually it for a long time I saw it only in the transcendent and my connection with the body. But I think these 4 pillars really cover that. So I do feel I belong at last. I really do feel I belong on this earth. I belong in the circumstances of my life. I belong where I live, which is something that was very elusive for a long, long time. I do have a purpose. I have really solid access to my transcendent, to the transcendent dimension, and the narratives are really important. So, and here maybe something for us as listener, for instance, like I suffered from depression for a very, very long time. It started in my teenage years, my 20s, my 30s. And one thing that was really important, apart from trauma work, was really looking at the thoughts that I continuously, automatically would get entangled with. And depression, I think, is something that is quite prevalent in our Western society. And I have found that a really good way, apart from meditation, where we see, okay, this is just a thought, but actually also examining what are these sort of like the storylines that always run in the background, and picking them up and writing them down and refuting. They're obviously often so irrational, so untrue. And if you do that every day for sort of 10 minutes, automatically sort of clearing that out, you drop more into an authentic connection, not just with yourself and that wordless knowingness, but also, the blinders fall off, and there's this automatic sort of felt sense of being in this seamless field of what's out there. So yeah, so that's
Mm. Yeah, I
mm,
love that. I know it reminds me of a time when I tried to write down every single thought that I had for like
oh
an
my
hour
God.
at a time, which is amazing. And it's such a strange thing because
Yeah,
once
yeah.
you start noticing them as thoughts that just come in,
Mhm,
and then bring
mhm,
them into the light,
mhm.
something really strange happens. And I think that's similar to what you're experiencing. This
Mhm,
ability to connect with
mhm.
the being beneath those thoughts, so
Yeah.
that we can encourage those thoughts to be uh, less in control, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they can continue to dance in the periphery, but we don't get as entangled anymore. Yeah,
Mm. Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So, before we go to the end of the podcast, I'd just love for you to share a little bit about your book because I know it's going to be released soon. Is that right? Uh,
Yeah, October 28th. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Mhm.
would you share what would someone experience reading this book, and
Mhm.
what is the kind of the core elements, and what would you love somebody to get out of it?
Mhm. Mhm. I think it will explain a lot if I share how it came into being, because I set out, I wanted to write just a manual for my clients. Like, okay, these are, these inquiries, these are the practices, these are, the tools, and so on and so forth. And I started doing it. And then I had the gracious insight of sharing it with an editor. And she looked at it and she's like, do me a favor, just write something more personal. And I was, personal? This is not about me. Long story short, I started to write a personal anecdote from my quite adventurous life. And as I was starting to write it, my body lit up and I could feel sort of like a river opened, and it felt so natural and um, enlivening to write more personal. So I eventually realized, like, drop this manual. Like, you become constipated when you just sit down and sort of become so conceptually. Um, but so I trusted the process. And at the beginning, it wasn't any more than this is then to be published. It was like, no, something wants to be put on paper or on the computer screen. And I gave myself over to the process, and I feel I was at the mercy of it because it was really wanted to come out. And what is really interesting, and I have this from a dear friend of mine, Mark Matusek, who teaches writing to awaken. He says, and he has published many books, he said, the more personal you write, the more universal it gets. And I think when we really write deeply from the raw and the vulnerable and the shitty, gritty, pardon my French, stuff that happens in our lives, we connect with a raw humanness that we all have. And I feel at this age, we should sort of get away with all these, the expert and the one on the pedestal, but just like, oh my God, we all having a human experience.
Mhm.
And, and I think there is some value in sharing it. I think if you have had severe trauma history, are in a major crisis, um, this is sort of like a book I always felt I would have wanted to read back then when I was in the dark, because it is, I think it's inspirational. It normalizes pain. but also there are many teachings, and they're sort of the archetypal stages of our, you know, journey of individuation, as Jung would say. So there's, yeah, I think it's a lot in there. And some of my friends, but also people who read it, said it's a page turner, so it won't be a hopefully it won't be a boring book. So I think you will find, yeah, maybe a good companion. Yeah.
I'm excited to read it, and I feel really grateful that I've got a version of it now before it comes out. So I'll definitely be doing that after this podcast.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess my question to you now is, we've covered a lot. What
Mhm.
would you love people who are listening to know, based on your
Mhm.
experience of life, and either from the message that comes through in the book, or just generally, what haven't we covered, or what would you love people to know?
Hmm. I think what I want people to know, that something then is already fundamentally okay. And that something, even as we speak and even as we hear the words, something inside of us is listening. And it's sort of like a very um, invisible presence, but that's what is already whole. And no matter how many mistakes we've made, no matter how we have moments of deep despair, they're temporary. But underneath it all is this open ground that is fundamentally free and warm and loving of this human self. Yeah.
Thank
Mm.
you so much. Is there anything that you would like people to know about, any events or anything coming up, ways to connect with you? We will obviously share your details in the show notes.
Thank you. Well, I offer free online meetings. So if you go to my website, annetteknopp.com, there's a calendar or online meetings. I tend to share them more often again. I pause them a little bit also to get through the hump of publishing a book, which is so laborious. Um, and then I do retreats. I offer retreats. Um, there's one coming up in in June, which I co-teach with a woman from the UK. It's called uh, Igniting Sovereignty. It's a women's retreat, Igniting Sovereignty, Spirit, Soul, Soma retreat, because I feel women, we need to ignite that sovereignty. We culturally have been disconnected from that embodied self-dignity and inner authority for, yeah, for a long, long time. And I do one in December, which is called Boundaries, Being, and Belonging, together with a seasoned trauma therapist, where we highlight and do practices to really deepen our understanding of boundaries. What is our true belonging? How can we practice belonging also in everyday life? Not giving over always, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, beingness. So yeah, so these are things I share.
Hmm. Wow, I would love to come to any of those. They sound fabulous.
I
Oh.
would love to come to your North composting that you said at the beginning. I said, I'm sure there's something for me still to learn and to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thanks so much. That was a really lovely conversation. And I really resonate so much with the way that you speak. You speak beautifully. And I really appreciate the ground that we've covered in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking all these potent questions. Yeah.
So, for all you listening at home, thank you so much for listening to this conversation. I really loved exploring what it means to walk a truly human path, one that doesn't try to escape the messiness of life, but instead finds sacred right there in the middle of it, where we are. if this conversation stirred something in you, if you're feeling the call to align your life more deeply with what's true and meaningful, then I'd love to invite you again to my live masterclass, Designing a Life Aligned with Your True North. And I really I'm holding these regularly now because I think it's a beautiful chance to take what we talk about here and begin applying it to our own journey of purpose and connection. You'll find all the details and the sign up link in the show notes below, as well as ways to connect with Annette. And as always, if you found this episode nourishing, please do share it with someone who might need it too. Please also rate it or leave a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere that you listen, because it really does make a difference. And we all know here that connection matters. So until next time, take good care of yourself, stay connected, and keep listening for what's true.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Connection Matters podcast. I hope today's episode inspired and empowered you to deepen your connection to yourself, others, and the world around you. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe, share it with those who might benefit, and leave a review. It really helps others to discover the podcast. You can also join our mailing list to stay updated with new episodes, inspiring thoughts, and free resources designed to support your journey. Together, we can build a more connected, compassionate world, one conversation at a time. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep creating the future that you want to live in. Go well, beautiful human.